Thank you. I am one of the co-leaders of the policy practice group, and great to be here with everyone today. We're really excited to have a presentation on adaptation resilience work happening in Virginia, which we'll get to in just a couple minutes. But before we jump to that, we wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to introduce themselves in the chat. Thanks, Josh, for getting that started. So feel free to do that and share anything that you're up to that you'd like people to know about there in the chat. And then we're also going to kick things off with any kind of general updates on policies that people are seeing from their neck of the woods that you want to share on. I know there's just earlier this week, the FFRMS final rule and request for information on NFIP's community rating system were dropped. I am not expert on that, but if anyone wants to jump in and share more on that for the benefit of the group or anything else, I'm gonna pause. Feel free to raise your hand or just jump in if you have adaptation, resilience, policy updates to share. Yeah, Rod.
Some reason my camera isn't working. It shows it's on, but I don't see a picture. Do you see a picture?
I don't, but you know what? We can hear you, so go for
it. Great. Thanks. Great to see everybody. It's been a while. Rod Scott with the Flood Mitigation Industry Association. Yeah, the FFRMS is out from FEMA, which is interesting because we just got back from a week in Salt Lake City at the Association of State Floodplain Managers National Conference. And the big buzz there is, of course, the in our world, the American Society of Civil Engineers 24, ASCE 24 is our guidance documents for all of the calculations for buildings and foundations in the flood zones. And basically, it's been announced that ASCE 2424, which will be official as of December, is going to take the 500-year flood zone is going to be the 100-year flood zone. We're not going to have a 100-year or 1% chance for construction anymore. And then it goes up to 750 for another category of buildings, and then 1,000-year storm elevation requirement for all critical facilities, which is going to put a real monkey wrench in fire stations in neighborhoods. And if you don't have fire stations in neighborhoods, you can't get fire insurance in your neighborhoods. It's forever going to change us, and it will be incorporated into the 2027 building codes for the first time. It's always been an attachment and a reference thing, but now it's going to be actually adopted within the codes as of 2027. So higher and stronger is now going to be quite a bit higher and stronger. So just thought I'd share that.
Thanks, appreciate it. If anybody else wants to jump in to share policy updates for the benefit of the group or share them in the chat, I will pause again for a couple moments here. Feel free to raise your hand or just jump in. And Rod, it looks like you got a question from Shauna in the chat. Maybe you're able to share that link. That'd be great. Well, as we go through, oh, sorry, go ahead. As we go throughout the meeting, if anybody has updates that come to you that you'd like to share, please add them in the chat. Angelina, I'm going to turn it over to you for any updates from the ASAP staff side of things.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, so just a couple quick updates from ASAP. In the network news that was sent out yesterday. Oh, sorry, there's a little feedback. Sorry about that. Network news was sent out yesterday, and one of the things we are announcing right now is a request for TA providers for the TICTAC program that we are working with on the EPA. TICTAC, as many of you I'm sure know, but the Environmental Justice Technical Assistance Centers. ASAP is partnering with the Institute for Sustainable Communities as a national TA provider. ISC is the TA provider, and we are partnering with them to connect with members of our network who might be interested in being a technical assistance provider. So there's an interest form that was sent out in network news, and we are looking for anyone who has experience providing technical assistance in different areas. The form outlines some of those things. Happy to provide more information if anyone in particular is interested. And I can put that form in the chat as well for ASAP members. Yeah, I see, Honora, your hand is raised.
Yeah, I just had a quick question on that. I was looking at it and looking at the form to fill out, and it asked for what organization you are representing. It doesn't seem to be suitable for individuals who want to put their information in there. So I wasn't sure how that should be handled or if that was the intent.
Great question. If under organization name, if you're just an individual, I think you can just list individual in that form. I think it should be fine. I think I can let Kyla and Jen know that maybe we should update the format of that. But yes, if you're working as an external consultant or just an individual who's interested in still being a TA provider, I think that's fine. Sorry about that. Thanks for pointing that out.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I think I will hand it over to Shannon to introduce our topic and speaker for the meeting today. Shannon, over to you.
Yes, hi. Let me look for, I have too many things open. Okay, we're really happy to have Annette Osso with Resilient Virginia. Really happy to have her today. She's the Managing Director of Resilient Virginia, and she's her certification is Lead AP. And that is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And she's a sustainability and resiliency professional with extensive background in resiliency, green building, energy, and sustainable development. She has been working with Resilient Virginia since 2014, and she's bringing resiliency resources to communities and businesses around the state of Virginia. Her accomplishments have included 5 statewide resiliency conferences, the Virginia Resilience Academy Series, a Rural Resiliency Forum, and the development of a resiliency checklist for local governments, local resiliency events, and working with local communities on resiliency planning. And we're really happy to hear her talk with us today. We've had a lot of discussion about rural capacity and working with communities that maybe aren't on the coast and don't have a lot of capacity, and maybe working with regional planning organizations and that sort of thing. And I know that Resilient Virginia works a great deal with the regional planning organizations in Virginia. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Annette has to say. And we also have Brindle Wolf with us, and she's a coordinator working with Resilient Virginia on this initiative that Annette is going to introduce to us today, amongst the many different initiatives that Resilient Virginia has under their arsenal. So go ahead and take it away, Annette. I'm going to be collecting questions that will kind of take maybe at the end or maybe throughout, depending on how it goes. So go ahead, Annette, take it away.
All right, thank you, Shannon. Let me share my screen here and get the slides up here. All righty. Can you all see them? And it does say next week, but that's that's because I'm using the same slideshow.
Yeah,
all right. Yeah, you can see them. Okay. All right, great. So Resilient Virginia we're a nonprofit group working to accelerate resiliency planning in communities around the Commonwealth. We take a educational and action-oriented approach. Our goals are typically to inform diverse community representatives about challenges, climate and man-made and natural, to educate key groups about the various models for resilience planning, and to activate communities to work on plans and projects where they're able. We have always decided to approach resiliency from a systems level, to define resilient communities as having some of all these different aspects that include groups of activities or programs and policies that include ecosystem services, both recognizing, again, the impact of climate on some of these things, and then the opportunities to mitigate the impact through adaptation. Economic activities, and again, the impact of climate on current jobs, but also the opportunities. And of course, in Virginia is one of the coal states, so you have the opportunity for economic diversification here. Community actions, under which we group all the planning things, whether it's resiliency planning or hazard mitigation planning, also taking into account health, equity, and other social aspects of resiliency. And then lastly, the infrastructure and building side of things, which covers a lot, whether we're talking about the built environment, transportation, energy systems, or buildings per se. So that's how we tend to speak about resiliency. Just a quick look at some of our various programs. Shannon mentioned we have biennial conferences. The last one was on economic opportunities for community resilience. Given the massive amounts of funding available, we had a lot of federal speakers in, as well as state speakers, and looked at that side of the resiliency programming. We keep a resource and funding hub as up to date as we can do that to provide people with again, particularly on the funding side, since there's so much funding, not reinventing, but really kind of pointing people to what is out there. For example, the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network has a good listing of funding. We've, again, the Resiliency Academy, we've done that for 5 years now. This year, happily being funded by NOAA through the Mid-Atlantic RESA and focusing on climate and hazard mitigation planning. We've just started working with the Virginia Energy Office as subcontractors to the Virginia Energy Resiliency Study. We have, which will look at developing an energy resilience metric for this communities, and then zero in on 10 communities to look at developing resilience resiliency hubs. And let's see, the Environmental Justice Data Project is one that was funded through a foundation that we're partnering with Virginia Commonwealth University to look at working with 3 sets of communities, gathering data on hazards and working with the underserved populations there, and ultimately pointing them toward funding programming. And then we've started this year a small spotlight series, which again, this year, with the first one was focused on all the multiple funding sources there. Anyway, then we have our Resilient Virginia Collaborative Alliance, which was launched in October 2023. So as you may know, it's the mission is to really work to pull together a collaborative network of cross-sector stakeholders to create a roadmap for climate resilience in Central and Southwest Virginia. This kind of built out of our working with a lot of different communities in a very informal way, and it was a way we felt to make this more concrete as far as the network, and a goal for formulating some policies and program direction, excuse me, in the non-coastal areas of the state. So ultimately, with the goal of helping these areas become more resilient as we're facing climate and also economic, social, and equity challenges. So here again, we mentioned planning district commissions. These are the ones we've defined it by the planning district commissions. And then of course, where there's opportunity, we're working with cities, towns, and counties within those planning districts. So here's our timeline of what we've been doing. And again, I have a slide at the end, but I'll just say we did happily get some seed funding from the Institute for Sustainable Communities that got us going here. And they also have a cohort kind of program, which I think it's unfortunately coming to an end, but working with groups around the country that are in some stages of putting together coalitions or collaboratives. So they were also kind of mentoring us and very helpful on how to best go forth to put this together. So we formed a steering committee, again, working cross-sector. So we wanted to put together governmental folks, NGOs, private businesses, and universities in that committee that work to develop our mission, our vision, our strategic plan. So we worked on that, and then did set out to do a kind of a high-level survey of the planning district commissions. And we now need to really make that more detailed, but this was a first look at what's the state of readiness, essentially, whether it's planning program or programs in that area. We wanted to make sure to include a climate equity aspect to this, so we hosted a climate equity listening session. Excuse me. And I think that went fairly well as a first effort. We had a facilitator who's an environmental justice facilitator type person, and we all felt we should definitely keep that sort of thing going and have more than one of these, in the future here. So we wanted to probably set up, I believe we'll probably set up a working group that is an environmental justice group particularly. We also then, and working with the steering committee, asked, what are your priorities? What kind of bubbled to the top is what worked out to be these now working groups that we've set up. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But in September, we're going to have a kind of all hands visioning meeting that'll be facilitated, highly interactive and all that, to work to start to set out priorities for that the region. And then the idea is to ultimately, and we won't get through this through December, but we want to do a first draft of a roadmap for regional resilience, again, in this inland, non-coastal, mainly rural region of the state. So the working groups that we came up with, we have water infrastructure, which is again, an interest expressed by the group, being now facilitated by Denise Nelson, who's very knowledgeable on the water side of things, and she's an engineer, and she's leading that. Clean transportation, facilitated by Alan Harnett, again, very involved with the clean transportation side of things in our state. Agriculture and climate, and I just put agriculture, but that's under development now. There's a lot of interest there. All these things have different aspects. Of course, just a moment on agriculture, you have folks that are interested and are working on projects that are looking at regenerative agriculture projects, looking at soil, water problems, looking at solar energy on farmland. But also there's an overarching concern here, which comes down to economic viability, because as we probably all know, there's it's difficult sometimes for the smaller farmers to operate in a economically feasible way. So that keeps coming back to the top here as far as economic resilience, really. And then folks also really express an interest in emergency preparedness, hazard mitigation. So we'll see if that develops into a work group. Let's see here. This is a bit about our visioning meeting, which will be September 25th at a farm that's down by Blacksburg. And it's also has a venue site there. So we'll be also, they're interested in the agricultural working group, so that all works together. And again, the goal being to develop climate resilience priorities for the region and agree on what are the 5 or 6 top things that most folks agreed with, and really began the process of defining a roadmap. Why is this important? We've seen this work well, this kind of process on the coastal area where they're 10, 15 years ahead of the inland area. Is of course they were the first ones to have, you know, the kind of undeniable impact of climate with sea level rise. So the communities, the Planning District Commission, the businesses, the universities there, Old Dominion University and William and Mary, ended up working together on quite an extensive process of, again, defining their priorities, which are obviously dealing with a lot with sea level rise and flooding, and really helping to put their case in front of the state and then ultimately the federal government for funding on needing to work on climate resilience planning and projects. So the coastal area is definitely ahead of us and ahead of the inland part of the state in terms of solidifying their voices in terms of what's out there as far as their priorities, what's important, and what do they need to get done as priority projects, a lot of which in the coastal area is infrastructure to mitigate the flooding. So I mentioned the ISC, and again, their funding came from the Urban Equity Climate Compact, which I think worked quite well. It was a small grant, but it was also good to talk to other groups around the country who are in some stages of forming or have formed collaboratives. We have happily some private donations supporting us to the end of 2024. And then we are interested, we do need to find funding for ongoing, and we hope an expansion of our staffing capacity and moving this thing forward. So we feel there are a lot of moving parts and a lot of activity, but it's just not well organized now in the inland area, rural areas. So that's one of our goals there. So I'll just stop there. Maybe if there are questions, I'll be happy to take the questions.
Sure, there are some questions.
I just want to say, Brenda Wolf is here too, as you said, Shannon, and I just wanted to put this slide up. There's our team here. Sorry.
Sure.
Okay.
No, that's okay. Maybe if you want to go back to that map that has the slide that has the map, and maybe you can orient everybody to where the coast is and what communities you're working with, and maybe talk about some of the planning district commissions, because there is a question that asks about, it's curious about what role the state of Virginia plays. Are they at the table or utilizing this network for their engagement to inform policy and programs? So I just kind of wanted to maybe you could talk about maybe some of the communities you're working with, and then maybe talk about your relationship with the PDCs, and also how you all work with the state based on this question.
All right. Yeah. And as I said, happily the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, which represents, this area that's very coastal, Norfolk, and is here, and then the more rural areas, and of course the Eastern Shore, they're the ones that sort of got the head start, because again, they've been impacted by the flooding for many years here. We decided to, work with these 11 planning district commissions, and this is kind of Richmond West, and so Charlottesville is in here, Roanoke, Blacksburg, and then of course far western part of the state. Harrisonburg is up here, and you have the various universities. You have James Madison University, UVA, Virginia Tech, and many other private colleges in these areas that are on our committee in various ways and helping with things. So, but we've over time, because we've been doing the Resiliency Academy, which has been really oriented toward governmental folks, so everyone is welcome to be in there. We've done a whole series of what are the tools for resiliency planning, the NOAA 5 steps to community planning and to resiliency planning and other tools that are publicly available. We kind of talked, had people present about. So we really have started to develop a good working relationship with, some of the planning district commissions more than others. And so we thought that was a good basis from which to launch our efforts here to particularly engage them and have them help us engage localities where there are, particularly in the rural areas. But let's see, the
PDC, are the
yeah.
planning district commissions, are they state agencies?
No, well, no, they get funding through the state, but they're government, they're not policy, organizations, but the state combines multiple counties into these planning district commissions. So it's interesting. They don't have a lot of money coming from the state budget. And so they kind of have to depend on grants and such themselves, but they typically will be handle transportation planning. They'll handle hazard mitigation planning. They'll handle comprehensive planning, particularly in the rural areas, or they'll help the rural localities with their plans. But they're probably regionally doing transportation planning for sure. And then they may help when localities within them have to do like their FEMA hazard mitigation plan, they'll help those localities work on those updates for those. So yeah, so that was a good place to start, so we can go kind of deeper into the localities to pull people to our working groups and that sort of thing. So but a question about the state. The state is interested in what we're doing, I would say, and we haven't we don't have a formal relationship with them at this time. What is happening at the state level, the good news here is under the prior governor, they had started, again, they'd been working for like 15 years in the coastal area. So there was this big effort to put in place the coastal master resiliency plan. And the first round of that got done. And then it actually got institutionalized through state legislation. So they're in phase 2 of that. But also good news is that they also are setting out to do a statewide flood protection planning process. So recognizing that flooding is one of the main disasters that happen throughout the state, and they're starting the state out of the Department of Conservation and Recreation, starting to work on that process.
Okay, so I do have another question. Are you all considering any specific needs or designation of receiving communities for those moving from coastal areas or others? So this has to do with maybe coastal communities that have a lot of risk, or you all thinking about receiving communities, people moving away from the coast to receiving communities?
We do have folks who will mention this as shouldn't we be talking about, the out migration that's going to happen, climate refugees, whatever you want to call them. But I'd say that's not an immediate thing yet, because there are so many other problems basically that these localities are dealing with. It hasn't hit folks yet as one of the priorities. As we're saying, when we did our survey, I don't know if Brendel, can you come into this and talk a minute about their survey for the planning district commissions?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so as Annette said, we sent out a survey to the different PDCs that are listed on here, and we were really trying to gauge where they were at in terms of thinking about this and whether they are already doing this type of work or what the limitations or barriers are. I would say that I think from the folks that we did get robust feedback on, they, a lot of them indicated that they have capacity challenges around funding or they just don't have the staff. So like limited staffing, those seem to be the two things that came up a lot in that survey. But there were folks that said that they were working on it around like flood mitigation and that type of thing. We were also, you know, as Annette said, it was a pretty high level survey. So we're hoping to like dig more into the weeds in terms of some of the responses that we got from people to see, you know, if they are doing that work, who are they working with? Are they working with the private sector folks? Are they working with universities? Like, you know, and to what extent is that work happening? So yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at in that regard with the PDC survey to date. And I would say that
What
it
the
was pretty
number one,
diverse. We also,
the number one problem, I'm sorry, tell them the number one priority that they came up with, just again, very high level, but
yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing was, you know, we had a lot of people that said that they would love to have like technical support. They would love to have just education and outreach from RBCA if, you know, they were getting involved with us. I would also say that another thing that came up is it was kind of interesting to see where the PDCs were at in terms of what sector they were focused on. So, for example, like the South Side PDC agriculture was a bigger concern than some, you know, some of the other PDCs. And then a lot of the PDCs, hazard mitigation came up. So it was kind of varied in terms of the responses from the different parts of the region.
Yeah, that's interesting. They talk about technical assistance, and you know, this next question is very interesting because I know this is a subject we talk about. And so the question is, can you say more about how you're lining up projects and priorities for state and federal funding? Is the state of Virginia ready to absorb this information in some formal way?
the federal funding stream, is that what you're talking about?
Well, can you say more about how you're lining up projects and priorities for state and federal funding? So imagine if you're helping them with tech, like, I guess, are you following the question? You might repeat it.
I think so, but let me just say we're not there yet. We're really just starting the working group. So
Okay.
And so part of what we know we're doing, like this spotlight workshop we did, because we know that there's all this funding, it's federal, it's coming to the state. How does it get to the localities? That's a kind of continual theme that we hear, and it's so overwhelming, frankly. So we had that as a theme of our conference and really made a point of getting representatives from the different federal agencies and then the different state agencies. And then our spotlight webinar, again, we had Michael Dexter again from SSDN, the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network, and then some state agency people, because again, localities kind of keep having to hear it. There's Department of Transportation money, it's coming into our Virginia DOT. When is that coming out? You know, how do you apply for it? Who applies for it? What kind of, you know, public engagement are they going to require? That's, you know, kind of a big thing now. So, but there's funding, of course, coming through FEMA, of course, and VDEM. There's money coming from EPA through our Department of Environmental Quality. There's money coming from the energy side into our Virginia Energy Office. And then there's money coming from into the Department of Housing and Community Development for, well, they've always handled the weatherization, the low-income weatherization, and the codes, you know, offices out of that office. So all these folks are seeing all this funding. And then again, the question is, how does it convey to the localities? So we definitely, there's a need to have assistance with that. And we were just talking about it, one of our working groups. We've only had, you know, 3 or so working groups on each of these couple of the startup groups. But that one of the things we're talking about doing is a training on how do you put in an application that is a winning application. We were talking about in relation to some state funding that's available. But we know, and then you all talked about the TICTAC, which is interesting because we have also a Mid-Atlantic TICTAC, but we have not heard anything. They haven't particularly, that I know, done outreach to localities or to organizations. So we're trying to circle back to them to see if you're supposed to be given technical assistance on how do you apply for grants, okay, can we get you all to, be more present in our state? We have a network, you can talk to our network. And we need more interaction with those big groups that have been set up, in that case by EPA, to help. So there's a disconnect there, I think,
Right. Well, I remember
there's the
when
intention, but there's a disconnect there.
I remember when I reviewed hazard mitigation plans in Virginia, and they were done through the regional planning commissions. And when it came, there were large participatory plans, and some of the small towns, we had a really hard time getting the participation of these small towns, because they would have a meeting and there would be one person working in this community. To have them go to an all-day meeting was really difficult, and to have a contractor go to a small town and meet with this town to find out what project do you want to include in this plan was a challenge. So I think actually giving technical assistance to a small town where there's one person who may work there part-time, I think is a real challenge. And I think that's something that makes it hard for these small communities, these underserved communities, to really participate in these application processes. So I think there's some consideration, how do you get technical assistance to these communities? How do you get that technical assistance to them to get them to apply for these grants? So I think that, when you're doing this program, think about that. I think you're probably already aware of all of that. You've been dealing with this for so long, but I'm sure you're thinking about that, especially. And I commend you for working in these small communities, because as I said, I saw this firsthand with looking at all these mitigation plans in these communities. Okay.
Right. Well, we like this idea of this cohort thing. And again, you need funding. We need funding to be able to set up a cohort, but we were thinking of working, with a planning district commission, and then have their towns or counties come in as a cohort working together, provide them this training as a group. So you're not having to go one by one by one. And then, maybe you really would have to do some combination of virtual meetings, and then periodically have in-person meetings also. But it could be done with funding. So that is something that we've looked at. And again, the planning district, we've tried this with one planning district commission out of the Roanoke area. They wanted us to do training on sort of climate 101 and, has adaptation. And we said, well, we need a small budget to do that. And they are just very poorly funded from the state. So they were not able to, put a budget together. So that it's the need is there and the interest is there, because, so many communities now are beset by disasters, basically. And that's kind of their motivation to go forth and do something.
Okay. So the next question has to do with, does the Clean Transportation Working Group also cover transportation resilience? Do you integrate with activities around regional military installation resilience planning?
Well, Brenda, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I dropped a note in the chat. I mean, to date, we haven't been doing anything in terms of talking to stakeholders around military installations. I think right now that's just because.
Brenda, can you turn your volume up a little bit? We can't hear you very well.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, to date, we haven't been working with any stakeholders around military installations, and I would say that that's because most of those are going to be on the coast, and we're not really working with those folks out there on that part of the state. But in terms of the transportation resiliency, yes, I mean, that is a conversation that we're wanting to have included in the Clean Transportation Working Group conversations.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in that happily our Virginia Department of Transportation now has created a resilience plan for themselves, and actually are going forth then in a somewhat organized way, I think, to look at where are the challenges or risks on the roads, bridges, tunnels, and they may be focusing initially on the coastal area, but that is an amazing thing for Virginia that they've actually put that together. They have a kind of an ongoing NGO advisory group, and that's a plus there. And I think that will, our goal is, one of our goals, to interact with what is going on that can be helpful, again, to these rural communities. They may not be aware of, the resources, et cetera, that are either at the state level or, again, sometimes at the university levels.
Right. So Annette, can you maybe talk about how you plan? You said that the coast is kind of a little bit ahead. I know that I think the capacity has been built and there's a little bit more capacity maybe on the coastal areas. Can you maybe explain how you plan on transferring some of that capacity to the rural areas, and what you plan on duplicating, and maybe some of the programs that you've already used and at Resilient Virginia?
Well, conceptually, just the process they went through, it was better funded than what we're doing, but the concept of pulling together working groups, defining priorities, and then really trying to have a more aggregated voice of, here are our priorities in this part of the state. We're trying to follow a similar process as they did. They have, as you probably know, most of the population base, the economic base is coastal. You have Norfolk, which is, massive shipping, as well as the military, the Navy there, which is, as I understand it, the largest naval base in the United States. So that's what they tell me. So that was another powerful, force of nature there to be having input. The military certainly sees the need, to work on all this. So they also were part of the motivating, force moving things forward there. So that helped them. And I think just the Planning District Commission was very insightful and, really good at aggregating the efforts of the different localities, and having the localities recognize they needed to try to work together on creating, again, some type of a regional planning effort. So that's, what went on there. Really, at 10, 15 years ago, they've been working on this. Also, I'll just say that what they have going for them is that NOAA funds coastal efforts. And so what's now come out is, NOAA's, coming out with climate literacy or environmental literacy projects of funding, but also this last round of funding for coastal localities, which comes through our Department of Environmental Quality, was to provide, I think, 3 years of funding to create, if they didn't already have resiliency plans, to go forward and create resiliency plans for the localities. So it's very, what a great opportunity, because you really have to do that. Again, data assembly on what are your risks and challenges, go forward with, ideally a lot of community interaction there, and input to gain the sense of prioritizing, and then really, work on building the local support for moving things forward, which they've done. They've done that quite well, of course, in Norfolk, Virginia Beach, the city of Hampton, and other communities there. They've really been able to go forward. So they're definitely down that path. But what we see is what's lacking is that similar kind of funding. I mean, up to this point anyway, for the non-coastal areas, that allow communities to do basic resiliency planning, like comprehensive resiliency planning. That is missing. We've been looking for it. If you're a big enough locality, Fairfax County, which is not in our, group, a very wealthy county, they had the funding. They've hired a consulting group. It went through a 2 to 3 year process and did a, fantastic resiliency and climate action plan. So, but a lot of these localities in our little neighborhood here are not able to do that. And they really need that external funding, to be able to do that.
Okay, great. Well, I want to mention, we're going to probably wrap it up in just a second, but I just wanted to mention that one of our members, Angie Hacker, she is in a very similar, I guess, situation as you. She works for the state of California, and she wrote a publication related to funding and working with disadvantaged communities as well. And there's a link to it. I don't know if you want to, Brendan, I don't know if you want to download it. It's really, I think a draft of it. I'm glad to have the final. And there are a couple of other of our members who have also included some publications. The Union of Shawnart Ubardi has also put a publication up, which I think I read yesterday. Looming Deadlines for Coastal Resilience, Rising Seas, Disruptive Ties and Risk to Coastal Infrastructure. And then there's another Ready to Fund Resilience. This is an ASAP. This has to do with funding, I think. So those are some of the publications that people put for people's information. But I wanted to thank you so much, Annette. We wish you a lot of luck on this project. It's something that I think we're all very interested in. It seems like there's a lot of funding out there, but a lot of the technical abilities of these local rural communities need a lot of work. And we appreciate the efforts that nonprofits are putting forward, and we appreciate your efforts, and we wish you luck in getting additional funding. And we think you have a really good structure so far. I'm excited that you're working with the metropolitan planning organizations. That's really excellent. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll send it back to Anna.
Thanks, Shannon, and thanks, Annette and team. That was great. And just to wrap us up here, as Shannon just mentioned, Angie shared in the chat an update, and she actually presented in facilitated meeting, as folks probably remember, earlier in the spring. So I thought we could give her a minute just to kind of share that update verbally as well. So Angie, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I guess just an update. If you guys were around a few months ago when we talked about better funding, I actually grabbed a lot of your input, and I was on a roadshow for a little while talking to communities about their issues accessing funding. And the focus of better funding is on community scale, so really local and tribal communities and their ability to access energy and climate dollars. And really just taking a deep dive into listening to communities over the last 4 years, compiling the themes that we heard over and over again in a million different listening sessions and venues around why it's so overwhelming and challenging for communities to access these dollars. So that report is live now. It includes 70 recommendations for state and federal agencies for how they can improve, right? So there's all this stuff we can do bottom up to do a better job of getting the dollars, but how about we collectively voice some recommendations to transform the way funding is deployed at us. And so that's the approach we're taking. And it's been nice to have it live and public and final now, because it's starting to, it's giving me a chance to do things formally here in the state of California. So I don't work for the state. I work to regularly harass the state, apparently. But I'm working really closely with some agencies that are on the exact same page, that are concerned about application burden. They're concerned about access to disadvantaged communities of all this funding. They see that people are paralyzed and getting left out. And so, some good things that have happened. We got formally, I'll just drop this in the chat. We got formally into some state level priorities, like their roadmap for what they want to do related to application burden. So they're referencing better funding. They're bringing me in to talk to the agencies. Now I'm showing up at workshops and talking all about what we know. I'm trying to influence California Climate Initiative, which is like 80 different programs funded by cap and trade auction revenues. It's just giving us an ability to speak more proactively about what we want to see and encourage the agencies when we have a chance to do some reforms to do it. But yeah, there's a LinkedIn group too if you're interested in joining. This is something that I think applies to more than just local and tribal recipients and more than just California. And I'd really like, what we're trying to really do is to inspire and some innovation in how funding is deployed. So not just tweak grants, but to think beyond competitive grants and to talk more about what would it take for communities to really access dollars? And what we think is it's going to take ongoing, probably state funded, if not led, regional hubs for technical assistance on project scoping, and to focus on getting projects into a queue or a pipeline where there's real dollars at the end. So standardized, kind of centralizing application systems, putting the dollar, like organizing the dollars in a way that you can actually access it through a pipeline. So that's what we're working on in California, and happy to talk to anybody else about that offline.
Thanks, Angie. Super exciting to see that go from idea generation to you having the final document and presenting it and seeing it appear in policy documents. So congratulations on that. And obviously a long road ahead, but appreciate your leadership on this. And we'll be excited to hear and support further updates as we go. I wanted to make sure that everyone knows about the next meeting, and then we can maybe officially wrap up. But if folks have additional questions, there are technically a couple minutes left, so we could circle back to those. But our August 2nd meeting is going to be really exciting. Joel Smith is planning it and leading it. And he and I just met with the speaker yesterday, and I am really excited for this one. Melissa Hoffer, who is the climate chief for the state of Massachusetts, is joining us to speak. Just in our couple moments of speaking with her yesterday, I got super inspired and jazzed about what's happening in Massachusetts and how it might help our work. And she's also really excited to learn from this group and hear what folks are up to here and kind of brainstorm. So I hope that you will join us and get your colleagues to join us. It's going to be a really exciting PPG meeting. So please join us, and thanks again for everyone joining us today. Wonderful conversation. And if folks want to more informally chat in our last couple of minutes here, please feel free to do that, continue the Resilient Virginia conversation. But otherwise, thank you, and we'll officially conclude the meeting for today.